for joining me on the debate with your introductory comments. I now move to M.N. Singh, who is speaking today for the motion against judicial overreach. Mr. M.N. Singh.
Well, maybe because of the excessive use or the overuse of judicial intervention, this word judicial activism has a very negative connotation. I do not know how many of you will agree with this contention of mine, but in the recent past, this excessive exposure of the use of this phenomenon has created a kind of a negative feeling among the masses, and that is why probably it has become a subject matter of debate today. If it had not had that negative connotation, probably we would not have been sitting here discussing this issue. Now, judicial activism is something which I have only one contention in this regard. Judicial activism, when intervention acquires the dimension of populism, or what somebody said, jingoism, or when it becomes a case of a judicial overreach, then I don't think you can blame me or the ones who feel like me if I feel that it is a case of a negative connotation. My contention is that anyone who is in a position of power should not be an activist. My first basic premise. Anyone who enjoys the state power, power under the law, cannot at the same time be an activist. Why? Because activism, an activist is one who brings an issue of public interest in the public domain and invites public debate. What does a judge do when he becomes an activist? There is no scope for a public debate. And therefore I feel that when a judge becomes an activist, it becomes a one-sided, unidirectional mechanism, which what the parliament of the people should have been doing, the judges start doing in the courtroom, and the problem arises there. There is a great possibility that the judiciary itself may acquire enormous power, which may not be very good in the interest of the democracy. One. Now, looking at the whole thing in this background, I feel, you see, judicial activism is a term which cannot have one single definition. It may encompass anything from, say, simply lambasting the government authorities for the so-called misuse of the authority or non-use of authority. It may also include a case of judiciary acquiring legislative powers and creating laws on public issues without having any public debate.
Mr. M.N. Singh, sorry to intervene there because I want to give everybody equal turn. I am enjoying only that part where you say that decisions are taken in the absence of public interest because the courts say there is too much debate.
I will close it by a few...
And you say there is too little debate.
I know I am becoming a little too vocal, so you want to cut me short.
Yes, I concede I do.
But I will close it simply by just give me a minute more. I feel when I said that power and activism cannot go hand in hand, it implies that there has to be a certain amount of accountability. Yes. The drawing the Lakshman Lekha means we are still leaving the matter open.
Yes.
There has to be certain accountability in what process.
Sure.
In one court said, questioned the investigating agency, why ever not arrested? And then therefore the investigating agency has gone head over heels arresting the people. Now what if tomorrow at the end of the investigation it is found that they are not involved?
Yeah,
the judges cannot be, the judges have certain, they are immune from any action.
Mr. Singh, in February 2010, I'm not just trying to cut you short, but in February 2010 a group of top politicians, military officers were allotted flats worth crores in your city, and I want to know from you what the police force, what the politicians, what the entire executive and the bureaucracy did and the others.
I am saying when the High Court orders the registration of an FIR,
yes,
can the High Court also order in the same order that you must seize the property of the gentleman.
Yeah.
Mr.
Subramaniam
Now-
Swami is thinking on the other
No,
side.
no, no. You see-
Mr. Swami is thinking.
Now-
Mr. Subramaniam Swami is convinced now
you said-
that I was invited by a moderator
You
and
said-
who has turned into a panelist, and he will have to moderate the rest of the debate.
I will
Can I correct
you said
May I please
you
invite the
said
next
that
participant?
judiciary should
other side
only
objects.
make laws, not execute
Just before
laws.
that,
This is precisely what the judiciary is doing
scam
today.
was opened not by the judiciary but by Arnab Goswami.
This is precisely
not
what the
forget that.
judiciary is doing
Thank
today.
you.
They are not only making laws,
Thank
they are
you.
executing laws.
Thank you
They have
very
become
much.
police officers.
I don't
Thank
think
you.
you are right, Mr. Singh.
Now I open up, one second. Interventions will come, rebuts will come on the other side, and I already have Mr. Subramaniam Swami on his legs. Was 2G a justification of judicial activism? Mr. Swami, your 3
First
minutes,
of all,
3 to 4 minutes.
First of all, are you going to give me as much time as you gave Mr. Singh?
I will give you.
That question is asked as a politician, not as a lawyer.
As long as somebody from your side is willing to cut that. Go ahead, sir. Please go ahead, Mr. Swami.
Well, first of all, this topic is framed in with loaded words. The words activism, compromise, these are loaded words, and I don't want to take up time explaining what the definitions of these terms mean. But it's a well-known fact that the Constitution is the supreme document, and all institutions draw their position and power from the Constitution. But the judiciary has been given the responsibility to interpret the Constitution. This responsibility is not with any other, whether it's executive or parliament and so on. They have no right to interpret the Constitution, only the judiciary can. So there's a very direct responsibility placed on the judiciary to intervene where the Constitution is not being followed. Now I have 4 questions. First is that if the government fails to act, then what does the citizen have by way of relief? I had filed a petition recently where I had written to the government saying that Ram Setu is an ancient monument and it should be recognized as an ancient monument and declared a national heritage monument. The government came to the court and said, we will not say yes, no, or be neutral. Now, how do I get relief? The only way I can get relief is by the court intervenes and says, as the court did, they said, if you don't take a stand, then we will hear Mr. Swami and give our decision. So here is a case where the government is not doing its duty. It's not a question of the judiciary impinging on the government's activity. The government has abdicated, and therefore the judiciary has to see that my constitutional rights are protected. Second question, if there is something arbitrary and illegal, how do I rectify it? In the 2G matter which you mentioned, Mr. Raja issued a press release on 10th of January 2008 at 2:45 p.m. in which he said, which the press release said, that those who want licenses should come between 3:30 and 4:30, which is 45 minutes after that, with a demand draft of 1651 crore rupees. Now, I can't get a 1 crore demand draft in 10 days. How can anybody in 45 minutes get 1651 crores? Obviously, that some people had advance information. They had already got the demand draft, and they were all ready. And some of them were, in fact, sitting in Mr. Raja's room, so they didn't even have to go to the building to deliver. Now, should not the government intervene? Such a huge loss was caused. And a minister called Mr. Kapil Sibal says that the loss was 0. People said he's not to be blamed because he doesn't know how to count beyond 0. But he releases it. How do I stop it? I have to go to court and say that my fundamental right has been affected, and the courts have intervened and they are now considering the matter. So therefore, to say Lakshman Rekha, let me say here too, had Sita not crossed the Lakshman Rekha, Ravan would never have been killed. So sometimes crossing of Lakshman Rekha is necessary. Then there is a question of your rights being denied. During the state of emergency, which Mrs. Gandhi proclaimed as a constitutional measure, the Attorney General went to the court and said, we can now take the life of any person without a trial at all, which was totally against. But for the judiciary at that time, there would have been no sanity at all brought in the implementation of the emergency. So we owe the freedom that we have today, the luxury of freedom, to the judiciary intervention at that stage. Finally, the judiciary has done a great service to our country by limiting the amending power of Parliament. Earlier on, if two-thirds majority you had in Parliament, you could amend anything in the Constitution. In fact, you could declare anybody as a king or queen. There was some suspicion that Mrs. Gandhi was preparing to be declared as the Queen of India. And just before that, in 1973, the Supreme Court said, no, Constitution is above everybody else. Parliament is a creature of the Constitution. Parliament is not supreme. Anyone who says Parliament is supreme is wrong. And that Parliament cannot amend the Constitution beyond its shape. There is a basic structure, and that basic structure has to be maintained. So therefore, if this is what you call as judicial activism, and if this is what you call as compromise, very good, that's what we want.
Dr. Subramaniam Swami, it can also be argued that you have used all the examples which you have used today. I can see that you stood up to respond, all the examples you have used today are merely aberrations which you are using today to pass a sweeping generalization on the system.
Give me an example which is not an aberration. Today, aberration is the rule, normality is the exception.
In that case, I take that argument. I take that argument and ask Mr. Kaul. Mr. Kaul, you have been CAG of India. We talk about 2G. Everyone questions the CAG nowadays, except Mr. Swami. Now, what do you do when there is a case like 2G? And while talking and delivering the 2G judgment, I'd like to quote, the court said very clearly, it is our duty, we are duty bound to strike down policies that violate constitutional principles or were contrary to public interest. Now I know that bureaucrats and politicians have a problem when the courts take over public interest. But who defends public interest? What would happen on the CVC judgment, 2G, Adarsh, black money? Would the bureaucrats be able to do the job? Floor is yours, and then I'd like to open this up to debate to other panelists who want to respond to the specific points made on the other side. Yeah. Quick interventions are coming up. There's going to be an open debate in 2 minutes. Please, sir, Mr. Kaul, your comments.
I have the advantage of having heard the other participants, so I'll take a more moderate view, because much can be said on both sides. The point is that we are discussing judicial activism and the compromise of executive powers. I don't think we have passed a stage when we could consider activism a pejorative. So that point I want to make clear. Number two, I have 2 points basically. One is a general point and one is a specific point. The general point is, why this selective activism? Judicial activism in full play in the PIL jurisprudence. No play at all in traditional cases. Cases keep on lying for years and they're increasing. In fact, the judiciary is losing public trust, not gaining it, because of the delays in the courts. There is no activism we see on that side. Nothing new, no innovation. The entire sort of courtroom dynamics has been changed by the PIL jurisprudence. But we don't see a similar change on the normal, traditional jurisprudence. Now, why this selective activism? Do the judges enjoy passing with PIL cases and like ignoring their normal work for which they were originally recruited? We would, as people, like to know. I'm speaking as a citizen. Number 2 point is the specific point. The specific point is this, that we must, you see, unbounded activism or unbounded anything is basically undemocratic. And therefore, we must have some kind of a rational distinction between legitimate activism and illegitimate activism. Unless we have that, we will have kind of a judicial chaos. We can work into a, you must have heard about Judge Dredd. Judge Dredd type of dystopia can emerge in a situation where there's unlimited activism without any definition of the boundaries of activism. Who can do this? Not the Parliament. The Parliament has proved itself enervated and effete. It is distracted and almost dysfunctional. So forget the Parliament. I still have faith in our Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has an immense amount of capacity for self-correction. Now, critics may say contradiction, but I would like to say self-correction. The Supreme Court should be used as the forum to which citizens can approach and get a clarity between what is legitimate and what is illegitimate when judges decide cases of activism. That is my position.
Mr. Kaul, thank you very much.